The city had already turned into a ghost of itself. It was late December, and the cold had bitten deep into New York's bones. Snowflakes drifted like pieces of ash beneath the dim glow of the streetlights. Most people had rushed home long ago, fleeing into the warmth of apartments filled with laughter, Christmas trees, and the smell of cinnamon. But beneath the Brooklyn Bridge, where the city's heartbeat faded into the wind, an old man was walking alone. His name was Elliot Graves, 70 years old, with eyes that carried 1,000 winters, the kind of eyes that had seen too much, lost too much, and still somehow looked for something gentle in the world. He pushed his rickety shopping cart through the slush, inside with remains of another day's survival, a few cans, a wool blanket stiff with frost, and a small photograph tucked inside a plastic sleeve. A woman smiled in the photo, young, radiant, the kind of smile that could outshine every streetlight in New York. Elliot stopped at the edge of the bridge, pulled the photograph from his coat pocket, and whispered into the wind. "Good night, Lily." The wind answered only with silence. Far above him, cars hummed over the bridge, headlights slicing through fog. To those inside, Elliot was invisible, another shadow among many. He had not always been this way. Once he had been an artist, a man who painted cityscapes and portraits for magazines. But when his wife, Lily, fell ill, every dollar went into hospital bills, and when she died, his world collapsed quietly, without anyone noticing. The city didn't care. It never did. Now he lived under the bridge, among whispers, rats, and the echoes of dreams that had nowhere else to go. That night, the cold was crueler than usual. The forecast had warned of a storm approaching, the kind that emptied streets and froze souls. Elliot wrapped his coat tighter and found the small alcove where he usually slept. He sat down, took a sip from a thermos that held only water, and tried to close his eyes. But then he heard something, a faint sound. At first, he thought it was the wind, the low howl that often crept through the steel beams. But then came a small, trembling voice. "Mom?" Elliot froze. He turned toward the sound. There, near one of the bridge's pillars, half buried in snow, was a small figure. "Hey!" Elliot's voice cracked as he approached. "Kid, what are you doing out here?" The figure lifted its head. It was a boy, maybe 8 years old, pale cheeks streaked with tears. His eyes were wide with fear and cold. I can't find my mom," he stammered. His lips were trembling. "She was here. I lost her when the cars came. I tried to find her, but—" He burst into sobs before he could finish. Elliot knelt down, pulling the frayed edges of his coat tighter around the boy. "You'll freeze out here," he murmured. "What's your name?" Ryan," he said through chattering teeth. "All right, Ryan. My name is Elliot." He forced a gentle smile, the kind that had long ago forgotten how to exist. "Let's get you out of the snow, huh?" The boy nodded weakly. Elliot guided him toward his makeshift shelter, a small space between two concrete walls where he had built a barrier of cardboard and old wooden pallets. He laid the boy down, wrapped the blanket around him, and rubbed his arms to bring warmth back. The boy's skin was ice cold. "Where's your mom now?" Elliot asked softly. I don't know. We were in the car. Then there was a crash up ahead. Mom told me to stay inside, but I saw smoke. I got scared. I ran. Then I couldn't find her." He burst into sobs before he could finish. Elliot knelt down, pulling the frayed edges of his coat tighter around the boy. "You'll freeze out here," he murmured. "What's your name?" Ryan," he said through chattering teeth. "All right, Ryan. My name is Elliot." He forced a gentle smile, the kind that had long ago forgotten how to exist. "Let's get you out of the snow, huh?" The boy nodded weakly. Elliot guided him toward his makeshift shelter, a small space between two concrete walls where he had built a barrier of cardboard and old wooden pallets. He laid the boy down, wrapped the blanket around him, and rubbed his arms to bring warmth back. The boy's skin was ice cold. "Where's your mom now?" Elliot asked softly. I don't know. We were in the car. Then there was a crash up ahead. Mom told me to stay inside, but I saw smoke. I got scared. I ran. Then I couldn't find her." Elliot looked out toward the road above. The faint wail of sirens echoed somewhere in the city. The snow had begun to fall heavier, thick flakes swirling like feathers. He felt the ache in his chest, not from the cold, but from memory. Lily, the hospital room, the beeping machines. Her final words, "Promise me, Elliot, never stop caring." And here he was, an old man with nothing, staring at a boy who had everything to lose. "All right, Ryan," he whispered, more to himself than the child. "We'll find her, I promise." Elliot took off his gloves and held the boy's hands. He rubbed them between his palms until color returned to the boy's fingers. Ryan looked up at him. "Are you an angel?" he asked in a small voice. "No, son, just an old fool who forgot to go home." He smiled faintly before his eyes fluttered closed. Elliot stayed awake long after Ryan fell asleep, listening to the snow piling up outside, the wind howling like a ghost. Somewhere far above, people celebrated Christmas Eve, laughter spilling out of windows, the sound of church bells echoing through the city. But under the bridge, an old man kept a silent vigil beside a child he didn't know. The storm came, and with it, the night swallowed the city whole. The world woke up to silence. Snow covered everything, the bridge, the benches, the streets, like a soft white shroud. Elliot stirred awake, his back stiff from the cold ground. The small flame of the candle had long gone out. Beside him, little Ryan was still curled up under the blanket, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. For a moment, he just watched him. There was something peaceful about the boy's face, untouched by the cruelty of the world that had scarred so many others. Then he heard the faint echo of sirens in the distance. It was faint, but it stirred something deep inside him, a reminder that somewhere out there, a mother was searching. Elliot stood slowly, bones creaking. He stepped outside the shelter, squinting against the pale morning light. The snow was thick, nearly to his knees. He could see tire tracks frozen into ice, and far away, a few police cars moving slowly through the storm. He thought about going to them, but he hesitated. He hadn't spoken to anyone from the real world in years. The last time he had, they'd told him to move along, to find a shelter, as if kindness was rationed. And yet, as he turned back toward the small shape under the blanket, he knew there was no choice. He had made a promise. When Ryan woke up, his small hands were warm for the first time in hours. He blinked and looked around, confused for a moment. "Where's Mom?" he whispered. Elliot crouched beside him, offering the thermos. "Drink this. It's just water. We'll go find her soon." The boy took a sip, then clutched the blanket tighter. "You promise?" he asked. "I promise," Elliot said quietly. They stepped out together. The storm had eased, but the wind still bit like knives. Ryan walked close beside him, one small hand gripping Elliot's worn sleeve. As they trudged through the snow, the city looked like a different world, silent, ghostly, endless white. A newspaper blew across the street, the headline half covered. "Christmas Storm Chaos, City in State of Emergency." "Why do you live out here?" Ryan asked, after a while, voice small. Elliot smiled faintly. "Guess I didn't have anywhere else to go." "No home?" He shook his head.
"You didn't have to," Elliot said. "We wanted to," Claire replied. "Ryan's been asking about you every day." Elliot looked at the boy, who was staring at the fire in fascination. "That's a dangerous habit, you know, worrying about old fools like me." Ryan giggled. "You're not a fool. You're my friend." The old man's lips trembled into a smile. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Then Ryan asked, "Mr. Elliot, did you always live here, under the bridge?" Elliot shook his head slowly. "No, son. I used to live up there, in the world." He looked up toward the bridge's arch, where the lights shimmered faintly. "I was an artist once. Your age, I used to draw on my mom's walls. Got in a lot of trouble for it, too." Ryan laughed. "Did your mom yell at you?" "Oh, she did. But then she'd smile. Said the world needed more colors." He paused, staring into the fire. "And then I met Lily. She was like color itself." Claire listened quietly, eyes glistening in the firelight. "We married young, didn't have much, but we had art. We had hope. She believed we could make beauty out of nothing." He smiled faintly. "We used to sit by the East River and draw people passing by, lovers, workers, dreamers. She said everyone carried a story in their face, if you looked close enough." Ryan tilted his head. "What happened to her?" Elliot took a long breath. The fire popped softly. "She got sick. Cancer. The doctors tried, but—" His voice cracked, and he stared into the flames as though they were memories themselves. "She made me promise something before she left. She said, 'Never stop caring, even when it hurts.'" He rubbed his thumb over the folded paper again. Claire's note. "For a while, I stopped caring, Ryan. I stopped everything. I thought the world had no place left for people like me." Claire reached out, gently placing a hand over his. "But you cared that night. You saved my son." Elliot smiled through the tears that shimmered in his eyes. "Maybe Lily sent him. Maybe she wanted to remind me what warmth felt like." For a while, they just sat there, the flames flickering between them, the bridge above humming softly with passing cars, like the heartbeat of the city itself. Then Ryan yawned, leaning his head on his mother's arm. "Mom, can he come home with us?" Claire hesitated, looking at Elliot. He smiled, shaking his head gently. "I have my home right here, little one." "But it's cold." "It's all right," Elliot said softly. "Sometimes the cold keeps you awake enough to remember what warmth feels like." Claire's eyes glistened. "At least let us visit you again." He nodded. "I'd like that." They stayed a little longer, sharing the soup and stories. Elliot told Ryan about the pigeons that nested under the bridge, how he gave each one a name. He made the boy laugh with tales of a grumpy old rat he called Captain Snow. And for the first time in years, Elliot laughed too. When they finally stood to leave, Claire wrapped her scarf tighter and said, "Good night, Elliot." "Good night, Claire. And you, little man, keep drawing. Promise me." Ryan grinned. "I promise." When they were gone, silence returned. Elliot looked up at the bridge, its cables stretching like strings of a giant harp across the sky. He opened his sketchbook and began to draw again. Not buildings, not strangers, but them. Claire's gentle smile, Ryan's curious eyes, the three of them by the fire, their faces glowing like a family he once knew. When he finished, he wrote beneath the drawing, "Kindness is the fire that never dies." He tore the page out carefully and placed it under the stone near the bench, the same bench where he had found Ryan that night. Then he sat back, warming his hands over the dwindling fire, and whispered to the wind, "Good night, Lily. I kept my promise." The snow had melted. Spring had quietly replaced winter, but the city felt colder than ever. Claire walked slowly across the Brooklyn Bridge, her boots splashing through puddles. Beside her, Ryan held a small sketchbook, the one Elliot had given him the last night they saw each other. The world had changed since that evening. The fire under the bridge had long gone out. The small corner where Elliot once sat was now empty, just damp concrete and silence. "Mom," said Ryan softly, "do you think he's okay?" Claire tightened her grip on the umbrella. "I hope so, sweetheart." "I miss him." "I know." She had been returning to the bridge every week, always bringing something warm, soup, a blanket, sometimes coffee, just in case. But every time, the spot was empty. At first, she thought maybe he was visiting another shelter. But weeks passed and no one had seen him. The volunteers only shook their heads. "Old Mr. Graves? Haven't seen him lately. Maybe he moved on." Moved on. Those words lingered in her mind, heavy with double meaning. Claire and Ryan reached the spot under the bridge. The rain pattered softly on the steel beams overhead. Ryan knelt beside the old bench. "Mom, look!" Something was there, half hidden under a flat stone. Claire crouched beside him, brushing away bits of dirt and paper. It was a page, folded carefully. She opened it slowly and gasped. It was another one of Elliot's sketches. This one showed the three of them, sitting by the fire, laughing together. At the bottom, in his neat handwriting, were the words, "Every meeting is a gift. Some just last longer than others." Claire pressed her hand to her mouth. Her eyes shimmered. Ryan tugged her sleeve. "Mom, does that mean he's gone?" She swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maybe he's somewhere better now." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. "But he promised we'd draw together again." She hugged him tightly. "And maybe one day we still will." They sat there for a while, listening to the sound of the rain, two small figures beneath a vast city. Then, from behind them, a voice called out, "You're looking for Mr. Graves?" Claire turned. It was an older man, one of the volunteers. His coat was soaked through, but his smile was gentle. "Yes," she said quickly. "Have you seen him?" The man nodded slowly. "He came by about a week ago. Left some of his drawings. Said he was going somewhere quiet. Somewhere he could paint the sunrise again." Claire felt her chest tighten. "Did he say where?" The man shook his head. "Only that it was by the water. Said the city had gotten too loud for old bones like his." Later that day, Claire and Ryan took the subway to the East River. The rain had stopped, and the clouds began to part, revealing streaks of gold. They walked along the riverbank, where the city met the water, where skyscrapers touched the fading light. And there, near a small wooden bench, they found it. A painting. It leaned against the bench, protected by a sheet of plastic. The canvas was vibrant. The Brooklyn Bridge at dawn, painted in soft oranges and blues, and in the lower corner, written in careful script, "For Lily, and for those who help me find her light again." Ryan stared at the painting, his small hand tracing the edge of the canvas. "Mom, he painted this?" "Yes. Do you think he's coming back?" Claire knelt beside him, pulling him close. "Maybe not, honey, but he left something behind. Something beautiful." Ryan was quiet for a long moment. Then he whispered, "Can we keep it?" She smiled through her tears. "No, sweetheart, we'll leave it here, where it belongs, for everyone to see." They sat together on the bench, watching the river shimmer in the fading light. Claire closed her eyes, remembering Elliot's words. "Kindness doesn't cost much. It just hurts a little when it's gone." She smiled softly. Maybe that's the lesson he wanted us to learn. Ryan tilted his head. "What lesson?" "That even when someone's gone, their kindness stays, like the fire he left behind." The boy nodded, eyes wide, thoughtful. "Then we should keep it burning." Claire hugged him tight. "Yes, we should." As night fell, they stood to leave. Ryan looked back one last time. The bridge shimmered against the twilight. The painting caught the last rays of the sun, glowing softly, as if the city itself was remembering the man who had once lived beneath it. And somewhere in that golden light, Claire could almost hear his voice, gentle, warm,